Hello and welcome to Petrus's webinars. My name is Alkesta Belknap and I'm a support geoscientist in the Petrus's Houston office. Today we'll be diving into the second webinar in the Spatial Editor webinar series, where I'll be showing you how to digitize an image and generate a grid from the digitized contours using the new gridding functionality within the Spatial Editor. If you missed the first webinar in the series, you can find a recording of it at petrusus.com.au. Before I get started, just a few announcements. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Petrus's website in the next few days. Also, currently everyone is muted, so we have the best audio quality, but if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter them in the questions panel. All questions and comments will be answered at the end of the presentation. I'll start today's webinar with a brief introduction of the subject matter to be covered. Then I'll go into a live demonstration and walk you through the functionality within the software, followed by a recap of what was covered and where you can learn more about the Spatial Editor's gridding functionality. We'll finish off by answering any questions you may have. In today's webinar, we'll start off by displaying data that will be helpful for drawing contours, faults, and polygons. We'll move on to using the Spatial Editor to create your grid by first digitizing and manipulating input contours, followed by creating blanking polygons to clip out regions of your grid where no input data is present. And finally, we'll finish off by modifying the grid geometry to improve our grid and add additional contours for more control. This brings us to the demonstration portion of our webinar. To begin, you'll need to display any data that will be helpful for drawing contours, faults, and polygons. For this demo, I've displayed a georeferenced image of a contour map. We will need to hand digitize the contours and convert the image into a new grid. To do this, we'll need to use the Spatial Editor, which can be found under Edit, Spatial Editor. Grids can be created in the Spatial Editor using File, Create Grid. We'll need to specify an output grid name, as well as the grid geometry. Currently, my cell size is set to 100 by 100 meters. The grid area of interest is displayed with a pink polygon, and the extent and rotation can be manipulated manually by users. By clicking on the pink polygon and then dragging the corners, I can increase and decrease my AOI. I can also add a rotation by using the Control key on my keyboard and the scroll wheel on my mouse going up and down. You can also use one of our quicker options here under Area of Interest, such as Map Sheet, to specify the AOI. The Generated Contours tab allows you to specify a contour increment for your generated contours, as well as any kind of refinements or additional levels that you may want to add. The Input Contours and Input Fault tabs are used to specify the name of the files that will be used in the gridding process. You can either create these files or open existing files. In this demonstration, we'll be creating these files. We can now say OK and move on to the editor. The top grid group shows 1. The grid itself that has been generated, and 2. An input data group, which shows various input data layers that can go into the gridding process and are editable by users. At any time, you can double-click on any of these layers to adjust the display properties. For instance, I will modify the display properties for my input contours, which we will be digitizing, to a thick blue line, so we can easily see our edits. To start digitizing the contours, we'll start off by using our drawing tool and specifying a contour level. We can also add a step such as 10, since our contour increment on our image here is 10, and then start drawing by left-clicking on our map. At any point, I can also zoom in and pan my view. To finish drawing your contour, double-click. The next contour level will be 1480, and I can use this blue icon here to go up one level, and then again start drawing. First zoom in and start left mouse button clicking along the contour. I can also hold down my left mouse button and interactively draw my contour. At this point, you don't have to be incredibly precise when drawing your contours, because you can always go back and use some of our Spatial Editor tools to modify your contour. Again, double click to end my digitized contour. I didn't do the best job here digitizing this contour, so I can always come back and use tools such as bending to bend portions of my contour. The editing circle size can be adjusted by using the editing circle bar over here, or using Shift and your scroll wheel going up or down to make it bigger or smaller. I can also smooth out portions of my contour by using our smoothing tool, decrease or increase intensity depending on how much smoothing you want to do, and smooth this contour out. And again, use the bending tool to bend some of this contour. I will need to digitize all of the contours that are on my map, but because our time is limited during this webinar, I'll open up another session that has all of the contours digitized. To generate a grid, we can select the option under Gridding, Regrid Full, or use the icon here in the Spatial Editor toolbar. The next step is to create a blanking polygon to clip the area of the grid where we have no input data. This can be done by selecting the input polygon under the input data group and using the drawing tool to draw a polygon around the area of the grid that we want to preserve. In this case, we want to blank outside of the polygon. And again, perform a full regrid. Next, we will need to make sure that our generated contours match our digitized contours. I can turn on the gridded contours by double-clicking on the gridding layer, selecting the Contours tab, checking on the Display Contours, and also I'm going to change the line style of my generated contours so I can better differentiate between the generated contours and the digitized contours. I'm also going to turn on some labels so I know what contour level is what. Notice that we have a poor match where we do not have very much data. One thing that we can do is modify the grid definition and tighten up its cell size. That did seem to help, but we still have some issues here in the center. What we can do is again digitize a contour for more control in this area. Specify the contour level. This contour here is 1490, and this looks like it's about 1480, so the contour level would be 1485. Again, use my Spatial Editor editing tools to smooth out some of my contours. Okay. And again, regrid. When you're finished and happy with the appearance of your grid, go ahead and save any changes you've made. Quit out of the Spatial Editor and display your grid and mapping, along with any contours that you want displayed. That's how you create a grid within the mapping module using the Spatial Editor. In today's webinar, you learned how to generate a grid from contours that you digitized from a scan image, also how to clip the grid by using a blanking polygon, and how also to refine the grid by adjusting the geometry and adding additional contours. Next up in our Spatial Editor webinar series, we have a Modifying Grid Nodes webinar next week, and then also in January, Adding Falls to a Grid. Thank you for your attention. At this point, I'll answer any questions. For any support questions, please do contact support@petrosys.com.au, or for any more information, contact info@petrosys.com.au. Thank you.